contractors, and suppliers to renovate existing houses into high-performance, low-impact homes that feel great to be in. For over 2 decades, Carolyn has been taking the message of climate action to homeowners and design professionals at events from grassroots green living expos to the Toronto Interior Design Show. She is the founder and chair of the Net Zero Architects Network, and in an effort to increase the rate of home retrofits, in 2020, she co-founded Homes to Zero, a startup on a mission to see the over 10 million single-family homes in Canada retrofit to net zero as quickly and equitably as possible. So please welcome Carolyn Moss.
Thank you. That sounds impressive. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Say in the back, yes. Excellent. Okay, great. Well, I'm really excited to be here. I was supposed to come last year, and unfortunately, I couldn't make it at the last minute. But here I am, and really a lot has happened in the past year. We've been working really hard. So I'm really excited to tell you about it, but I also want this to be a conversation. As I've told a couple people, I had a conversation with the City of Toronto this week that's got me really mad, and I might be on a bit of a rant today, but we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm really passionate about this. So feel free to, as I said, make this a conversation, chip in if you have questions. I'm going to be talking a lot about Homes to Zero, which is I'm an architect. I'm like sort of done green buildings. Henry's here. Henry and I did a project together about 20 years ago, off-grid, retreat center, green roof, you know, passive solar panels. Like, I've been doing these projects for a long time, and now I've moved into this kind of tech world, and it's really strange, but we're trying to, I'm trying to navigate that world. So I'm going to tell you a bit about that today. So this is where I'm going to talk about, I think a lot of us know why we're here, but I'll go into that a bit. We've talked about who I am, but then what is Homes to Zero, what we've done so far, what's coming, and then I've got some questions for you, and then, you know, we've got time for Q&A at the end. So I think we all know about the climate crisis. That's clear. I'm not going to tell you about that. But we're really, really interested in greenhouse gas emission reduction. That's the cause of climate change. 40% of greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. Majority of that is coming from single-family homes. Countries worldwide are committed to achieving net zero by 2050. That's way too late. I think we all know that. In Canada, jurisdictions like Toronto, PEI, Vancouver are targeting 2040. Still too late. But there's a lot of work to do. So you know, having a target there is great, but the earlier we can get going, the better. Single-family homes are a crucial part of those strategies, but none of the governments, and this is why I'm mad, is willing to say so, or what the targets are, or how they're going to need to be met. And so I think we just have to, like us as a group, just say, like, forget that. Let's just get this work done. So owning a net zero home, a home that is efficient. So how we define net zero is about emissions. It's not about energy. There's been some net zero programs out there by some home builders associations that have targeted net zero energy. And they seem to think you could put enough solar panels on your roof to offset your gas furnace, which doesn't really make any sense. So what we're looking at is a home that doesn't burn any fossil fuels. Number one, it uses only renewable energy sources. So ideally, we're getting electricity from a clean grid. Hopefully, we're going to get there. And then we also want to make it efficient. So we're not putting too much of a strain on that grid, and also so that you're not paying too much in utilities. And that's a huge contribution that each of us as, you know, homeowners, anybody who owns a home, can do work in that direction and make a huge impact on climate change without having to wait for anybody to tell them to do it or whatever. It's all something we can do and make a huge impact as a group. And then the other thing is there's us, right, who's all like committed, but Canadians are spending money on their homes, $80 billion in some years, and they just don't have the information. If they had the information that they needed to be able to do a better job, then I'm pretty confident like, there's been lots of studies done. Canadians believe climate change. They don't know exactly why it's happening. So if we get them the information, I think they're going to be willing to do the work. They just need the info. So, again, I'm Carolyn Moss. I've had this architecture firm for 25 years. And then, we've been doing these houses like one by one, renovating people's houses, doing these pretty houses in Toronto. Usually it's somebody who has quite a bit of money, who's spending a lot of money to renovate it. And I was like, we can't just do these one by one anymore. This house that I'm renovating, the house next door is exactly the same. And there's probably like half the houses on the street are the same. So how can we take this knowledge, and I would say the same to all of you, like how can we take our knowledge and then amplify it, right? So that's what we've been working on. That's why we founded Homes to Zero. And we also created the Net Zero Architects network. Some of them are here today. There's Daniel and Anna and Terrell. And so that was the idea of bringing together architects who are usually like competition. We're probably responding to the same homeowners. But we've been getting together for the past, year and a half at least, once a month to discuss what we're doing in terms of retrofits, like what challenges, what opportunities we're seeing. We've been writing letters to government. We all, like, who was at the Green Building Learning Zone? That was, right? Look at like half the people here. It was amazing. That was so fun to bring together all these like-minded people at the Toronto Home Show, right? Which I don't know who goes to the home show. I don't usually go, but because it's frightening with the squeegee people and right? But it was so cool. On the Wednesday, which was Green Building Day, we got the main stage a whole day, like Sylvia and like all of us were up there on stage talking to homeowners about this stuff. And it was really interesting to see the kind of demographic that day change. And so this Net Zero Architects Network has been, I think, like kind of expanding on that concept is going to be really important. Again, not waiting for governments to figure out what to do. Let's all like work together and see if we can amplify the message to get the information to homeowners and builders, right, designers, so that they can start doing, incorporating this information. Same with what Paula talked about. If we could, bring that in and also like, let's get it out there. And so, in founding Homes to Zero, I'm an architect. I do my little houses one at a time. I'm like, I don't know how to do this on a big scale. And so I had a client, Jill Locke, who she came to me a long time ago, and she's like, I want to do a net zero house. And she said I was the only architect she talked to who knew what she was talking about. And so we did this project. And then when Homes to Zero, the idea was kind of percolating, COVID had hit, and she just did, as a lot of people did, resign from a big, important banking job because, who needs that? And so I was like, she's a data scientist, extremely bright, used to making applications like development. And so she's co-founded with me Homes to Zero. We brought her in as treasurer of the Net Zero Architects Network. But she's the co-founder of Homes to Zero, and she's the one that's she's like, I've got Carolyn on pocket, on speed dial. I want everyone to have Carolyn on speed dial, and so that's what she's making happen. So Homes to Zero is an architect-driven platform that's accelerating the pace of sustainable home retrofits, and our mission is to get the over 10 million existing Canadian homes to net zero as quickly and equitably as possible. And it's a big challenge, but we're obviously we've been working really hard to try and make that happen. So what's net zero mean? I'm not sure. Actually, you did a bit of this, but let's see. There's builders. Who's a builder in the audience? And who's a designer? So it's like half and half, it looks like. And other homeowners or suppliers? All right. So, and how many work on renovating existing homes? Builders and designers, whatever. So not everybody, but that's really what we're focused on, is how we're renovating existing houses. And so what that means for us is when we're starting that process is, first of all, you want to make sure the home's ready. You don't want to be, adding all this insulation, putting new windows on, and the house has some really major structural issue, mold issue, old wiring, plumbing, hazardous materials in there. You don't want to be covering up any problem. But once you're pretty certain that the existing guts of the house are good, then your net zero house has lots of insulation. It's well sealed. Air changes are one of the biggest sources of heat loss. You're going to generate power and it runs on electricity. And that seems, I don't know, probably obvious for most of us here, not obvious for most homeowners, especially the runs on electricity part. I think homeowners in general don't realize that the burning of natural gas in their home is really the big problem. So this is the kind of goal that we're trying to get all the homeowners to. And we've created this journey to net zero. That's a 5-step process. The first one being you want to measure your home's current emissions. And there might be one other personal carbon calculator that does it, but if you go onto the Homes to Zero website and you just put in your gas, your electricity, propane, oil, wood, whatever you used last year, it's going to tell you your emissions, how much emissions came from your house. And it's really good to have that starting point to know, okay, where are the emissions coming from in my house? And we've got this, I'll show you what that report looks like in a minute. And then we do an assessment, and we do a virtual assessment. So it's what's the condition of your house, and how does it compare to, so everyone's talking about net zero. How does it compare to what a net zero house would look like? So, in 15 different categories, from envelope, right? Your insulation, your attic, your basement, your windows, your air sealing, and then your equipment, generation. How does your house compare to what a net zero house looks like? And then the third step is to create a plan. So like I talked about, on a street, there's like all these houses that are exactly the same. So maybe there's 10 houses exactly the same on your street, 10 homeowners who are completely different. And that's where the challenge really comes in, right? How do you then take that standardized house and that net zero, okay, this is what that house should look like if it's net zero, but then how do you then overlay what that homeowner's priorities are, what their budget is, what their schedule is, and create a plan. So some homeowners, maybe they're doing a big renovation and they're going to do it all at once, implement all the measures, but somebody else, maybe they just want to, renovate their bathroom or just do the heat pump switch. Or I had a client come to me and say, we had already done a renovation of their house, so the envelope was in pretty good shape, but it was done a while back before there were heat pumps that were very good. And so he came and said, I want to put solar panels. Can you help me get a solar panel supplier? And I was like, well, how come? What do you want to put solar panels on? He's like, well, I want to do something for the environment. I'm like, well, I know you still have a gas furnace in your basement, so let's talk about that first. If that's really your motive, then let's figure out how to solve that. And so fortunately, he had just sold some tech company and he did both. So that was good. And so he's got a net zero house now. But to really understand, I know, I wish, right? But then that's not everybody's case, right? And so somebody else is like, no, I just want to really know what's that one thing I can do that I could do myself, started, or when I do the next step. Or what you don't want is somebody doing something and then having to undo it later, because, so to get the plan in place to get from where their house is now to that net zero house, we think is really important. And then obviously implementing the plan. This is where my rant comes in. There's all these like government money that's been spent. City of Toronto is about to do this like crazy mapping thing where there's houses of different colors and your house might be red and somebody else's house is green, and but it's based on this predicted model that we've seen. I don't know if anyone here has ever seen a HOT 2000 or EnerGuide report. Anyone seen an EnerGuide report that's accurate? Maybe, yes. Dave, that's what I knew you would be we've talked. We haven't met before. But we have seen so many EnerGuide reports that I'm like, that's not even this house. Like, it says it's 2x4 construction. This is like a masonry house, and says like it, and it didn't matter. What I've heard from the EnerGuide, some of the advisors are like, people don't care if it's accurate. They just want the rebates. Doesn't matter if it matches, as long as the thing that I need is on the list. Anyway, so all this like fancy things, all that matters in the end is what you guys are doing, right? Which is actually implementing the thing. So putting the heat pump in, adding the insulation. And so this implementation part we think is really, really critical. And then we think it's important that as homeowners do this work over time, that they're able to monitor what they're doing so they can see their greenhouse gases as they're getting down to zero. So here's that score I was talking about. Homeowners, like I said, can input their utility data online for an instant greenhouse gas emission report for their home, and you'll get it by email and online. We'll all totally privacy, we're not really sharing that with anybody. And we use that real energy data for accurate greenhouse gas emissions. We've got it for across Canada, so Ontario is very different than Alberta or PEI. And so we've got all the different greenhouse gas calculations ready. There's something coming out in Ontario called the green button. And I'm curious about this from people. So right now you can, I don't know, I always forget my Enbridge login. So it was a bit of a pain, right, to go in and find your actual data for the last year. But there's something coming up called the green button data, where you'll be able to give us permission to just take your energy use. So if Enbridge, if you used a certain amount of gas last year, we're going to be able to just take that information directly so that we can give you a live indication of your greenhouse gases, which we're really excited about. I don't know if we can talk about this now or at the end, but if people have concerns, like, would you be willing to give us permission to just take your information, or would you rather just input it yourself? We can talk about that, but of course, it's a lot easier if we can just pull that data directly. And then we also have some educational content to hopefully spur people on to taking action. So that's the score, and it's totally free on our website. It's automated and live, ready to go. The second thing I had mentioned we do is this net zero assessment. So we've got a short questionnaire, and so currently we have some partners that we work with that would input that information directly, or the homeowner can fill out the questionnaire, and it provides instant detailed assessment of your energy use, building envelope and systems, and we send it via email or online. And like I said, it compares your current house to a net zero house. So for example, the net zero house is on the right, and it would be the values. So we've modeled what a net zero house would look like in all the climate zones in Canada. And so if you're in Ontario, then you're going to look at certain values in terms of insulation, what your equipment's going to be to meet that kind of net zero value. And then we kind of scale, where are you in comparison to that? With the red side being, okay, I'm using natural gas, I have no insulation in my house. And then in the middle, I've got a bit of an upgraded situation. My air tightness I've done a little bit about because I have my windows done. And so we try to give this really visual thing about where their house is currently compared to that net zero house. And it comes with also upgrade evaluation. And this is something that homeowners kept asking for. So what we look at is, if you were to do for a typical, so we've categorized the houses. You've got a 1,500 square foot house, and if you were to do each of these upgrades, what are the greenhouse gas reduction for each of those upgrades? So what would the reduction be for switching your heating? That's usually the biggest. Or if you were to leave things as is and just do your insulation, or just do your air sealing, or just do your hot water heater, what would those items each be individually in terms of emission reduction? What kind of typical costs for that item alone? So the thing we're trying to do is make it so that if you were re-siding your house anyways, and you just added insulation and siding, what that extra cost might be to just add the insulation necessary. So that, and then what rebates are and incentives are available. And so we can give that information like I did for that client that wanted the solar panels. I'm like, usually the cost per gigajoule, per ton of emissions saved for solar panels is like $2,000, right? But the cost per ton of emissions saved for air sealing or for heat pumps is usually like $47, right? Per ton of emissions saved. That's amazing, right? In terms of the cost of carbon, when you take into account the rebates that were available at the time, that went away and then came back, and that's a whole other rant. I came yesterday, the new building code and the new rebate program, too much to take all yesterday, so I've got to take my time to read them. But so then also we have a simple payback and then a bit of information about what to keep in mind in terms of the order. Obviously, and so what we've done is we've looked at, okay, we sort of developed our own envelope score. So if a house is has no insulation, no attic insulation, like if it's got nothing in terms of an envelope upgrade, then we're recommending that they do some envelope upgrades before looking at switching to a heat pump. But ideally, we want to get to the heat pump as quickly as possible. But just for those utility reasons, like what their cost is going to be, if they've got nothing on the envelope, let's get the envelope a bit better and then get to the heat pump. And then we've got some simple paybacks. I think I mentioned that. So that's the upgrade evaluation. So this is all taken and so this is all getting automated and developed and stuff now. So it's you guys know about that with Beam, right? That it's a whole other world of developing how this works. And in the end, the homeowner is going to have, this is their house, this is a net zero house, this is your checklist. So the items in red, these are things you need to look after. And again, a bit more information about what needs to be done. So then we get to the plan, which is, in my mind, the really interesting thing for homeowners. So it's what are my objectives, and how are we going to implement it over time? How are we going to get this house from red over to green? And then what are the, I'm going to take this so I can point. All right. So in this case, the house went and switched from a gas furnace to an air source heat pump. We added some insulation on the basement walls. Topped up the attic insulation, adjust a little bit of the air leakage. The rest was going to be done in the next phase when the windows and the outside envelope was wrapped. And so in this first phase, this house at the start wasn't too bad, but it was at 2.57. So the average in Canada is 5 tons of emissions per house. And so this house wasn't too bad because it's pretty little, 2.57. But by switching to the heat pump, it went to 0.26. That's what getting rid of gas does, right? That drops your emissions to 0.26, which in my mind, we'll call that pretty much net zero. Once the grid glows, it's fine. But then you want to keep the utilities down. So that next stage, we're getting to 0.15, but now that homeowner is saving about $3,000 a year in terms of, and that includes their adding solar generation, which is the thing. So a lot of people are doing solar generation because of the money that they can generate to then fund some of the retrofits. But you can see this is really the critical stage. But we're doing the other measures to make sure that the bills aren't too crazy. And then we're looking at sort of typical costs as we go along. And then this last stage is usually one that you can do it if you're doing it, but it's not that important. So currently we're working with designers and contractors. The assessment alone, we've got them on our website, $200 for the assessment part that says, okay, this is how your house rates compared to a net zero house. And these plans where we go to the house and then, or our partner goes to the house, in which case we share the revenue from it. So these are currently at $1,500, where you can get a really good report for a homeowner that demonstrates how this work is going to impact them. So that's something I'd also like feedback on at the end, to see if you think that's a good value for homeowners, and that would help you make your case to homeowners in terms of what they're doing when they're renovating. Oh, sorry. And so we create this net zero plan, and it shows this is what's going to happen in terms of your emission reduction over time. And so we space it out to 2050 and tell you if you're going to follow this plan, then this is the total amount of emissions that will be reduced from now till 2050. In one of them, it was really interesting that they were going to use from now till 2050 the same amount of emissions that they currently use in 11 days by following the plan. And so it's pretty amazing, like I said, the impact that we can have by doing these retrofits. So what's coming in terms of the plan? I scooped this. Aaron gave me permission from 475. And then we've talked a little bit a while back, but what we're looking at, because if we're doing this retrofit with insulation, I think we all know that if we're wrapping that house in foam insulation, you might as well have not done it. It would be better not to do it than do it with foam. And so what we want to do is integrate each of those upgrades, and we've modeled it already. We've modeled some of the typical upgrades in terms of the insulation levels with the beam calculator to say what's the embodied carbon of that upgrade. But one of the next steps is to then integrate the two to say, okay, it's going to reduce this much in emissions by implementing that. It's going to use this much to do it. And so when's that payback for each of those upgrades? And so that's been done a lot, I think, in new construction, but not so much in, am I right, in retrofits. And so that's something we're really looking to coordinate, because I think it's really important. We know contractors who aren't here and had similar things, right? That they're like, oh, we'll just add some foam and it'll be great, which we all know is not the case. And then the other thing that now that the rebates are changing, and we know over the years, like I hate the rebate programs that have happened, because they come, they go, they change, and it's really been a problem for the industry. And we try to avoid them, but people like them. And so what we're trying to do is just do other calculators. What we've shown in the past is, if somebody's buying a house or financing, that they're able to, the amount, if they were to take the extra mortgage to do this retrofit, that the amount they're paying for that mortgage is less than the utility savings that they're getting. So it's kind of a payback. So we're looking at doing those. And that was true, I think, when the interest rates were really low. So we're going to check now that things are changing. But financial calculators are coming. And then in terms of the retrofit part, that's really where we want to work with a retrofit coordinator. We do this kind of very manually at the moment. And then we're working at collaborating with designers. We've got a contracting group that has 150 franchises across North America that wants to implement this on all of their projects, which we're like really excited about getting that kind of scale out, because they're doing 10 to 15 projects each. So that's a lot of houses and a lot of emissions that can be saved. So that's the kind of thing, like we can't go homeowner by homeowner, but we can go work with designers and with contractors who have bigger reach. And so we're really, if there's anyone who wants to start implementing this, we'd love to talk to you. And so that, the cost of this totally varies depending on what the scope is and this is really a manual thing at the moment. But one of the things that those contractors are asking us for are those detail packages, like what, we'll go to the next page, like how do you do this? Like how do you implement it on a house? And so we're looking at creating prescriptive packages for different kinds of houses. So you've got your wood frame house, 2 stories. Here's how you put a window in. Here's how you do roof details that are really simplified, getting the membranes right. What kind of, like how you size your heat pump, how you size your solar panels. And so this is all like a huge project that's a ways off, but that's kind of where we're heading to. So that, again, people can get, am I okay?
10 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Is that-
No, that's totally good.
Okay,
I
good.
thought I'd have trouble filling the time. Apparently not. I chat a lot. So then again, I mentioned monitoring, and I think that's going to be important for ourselves, but eventually we know that there's going to be home energy reporting. Again, right now they're talking about using this weird method of, again, assessing. This is what was told to me, that they're going to ask homeowners to report their home energy reporting based on what they know that house was like in the past, based on the age of it, not taking into account any beautiful high performance renovation that was taken on it. And then they're going to give it some kind of score. And that might be used for like realtors to have better information on the house. And I'm like, but what about all these houses I've been doing and we've all been doing for 25 years that are super efficient? Well, they can't see that. So I'm like, it's crazy. So I personally think you should just be able to, like, this is how much the greenhouse gas emissions from my house last year were this. And so we want to give that information to homeowners, and hopefully eventually that's how they're going to be rating houses. We're creating right now a partner dashboard. So we're using Claire, who unfortunately isn't here today, but we're working with Claire right now on a project, but creating a dashboard so you can see all your own projects, how much emissions you as a group have saved from all your different projects, how many you have in the pipeline, etc., where each project is. And then, yeah, as I said, I've got some questions for you guys. We talked about who's done renovations. And so one of the problems I had when I still have, when we're doing projects for clients, is the fees are not huge. And so I can't do an energy model every single time I do a renovation project. It's just not possible. So what we did a while back is that we would create a typical project that we did. We would figure out at the time what the upgrades were before they sort of started bottoming out in terms of economic sense. And we use that for like 5 years, right? This is our go-to, like we did continuous installation long before it was needed, or required by code, but we came up with a system that worked for us and then we just went with it. And so, do you guys do energy models for the people that do renovations or designers? Do you guys do energy model every time?
Not every time.
Right? It's like too expensive. And so is it something that the homeowners would care to see?
So, yeah.
Or they're happy for the takeaways on the last one.
Right? So,
Or they were forced to do it because they're using an alternative material, and the jurisdiction said, you got to prove to me if that's going to work.
okay.
What I find is that my clients are asking the difference. So like the one chart that you were saying, that's what they want to know. They want to know, how is this going to benefit me? And so as a designer, I would love to have access to, something like that you're providing, so that I can, offer that to the clients, so that then they can make an informed decision instead of just Googling stuff and then they get the misinformation. Because as a designer, I don't know the costs of the actual construction itself, and so I find that I'm not knowledgeable enough in that area to give them the proper information.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be, I would love that for every single one of my clients.
Right. Did you?
No, sorry, I was
Yeah.
just.
Anyone else like energy models or?
I guess we see them more when we're renovating buildings for clients, but then it's for CMHC, and that's something we have mechanical and electrical engineers to do, is like a specialty report, and like you said, that's like 20 grand.
Right.
Like right off the hop.
Yeah. So homeowner,
That's multi-unit.
go ahead.
Multi-unit.
Yeah, multi-unit,
Yeah.
or say like a
Yeah.
institutional or
Yeah.
civic building.
Yeah.
Just like piggybacking on that, we may see this big CMHC commercial multifamily financing program. That was the other day, they just announced they may extend that to 40 units and under. If that happens, that's a game changer, because right now, that CMHC program requires you to energy model. The downside is that usually that means they're just modeling the building without gas, and they get the points they need
Yeah.
for the financial financing. but that will be harder to do for 4 units and down. So I do think that then they might actually consider something outside of just changing the rentals. So the modeling for access to that financing is required. So I know that's a pretty specific scenario, but that's again a big deal because it's going to push people, whether they want to or not, they will need to get access to those rates, and that's obviously a motivating factor. That's the ROI.
Right. Yep.
The issue I'm running into is in terms of trying to define or describe the importance of comfort. So
Yeah.
even though like I don't have a dollar value for that, so when they're looking at like this is how much it's going to cost to renovate, and then yes, it's this much more insulation, and yes, I'm saving this much more, but I'm like I'm only going to be in the house for another maybe 10 years, so I'm not going to get the payback. But I'm like, but the space that you can't sit in front of right now because it's minus 15 and your feet are always cold, that disappears. This is now usable square footage that you did not have before. So it's like if there's a way to express comfort as a dollar value.
I know, it's really interesting. Exactly that. Like you had talked about getting people into your homes so that they could feel it, because it's hard. I sold my last house. I did this little top up. I had a 550 square foot bungalow, added a second floor to it and a bit more. So it turned out to be about, with the basement apartment, 1,450 square feet. It went from $1,200 a year to heat as the 550 square feet to $600 for the whole thing. And my neighbor put their home across the street. It's in Toronto. They had a 30-foot wide lot, which is like luxury, private driveway. They put a 2,500 square foot house, and he had trouble selling it for, like, this is a while back, like $850,000, right? And then I put my house up for sale like 4 months later. We didn't put the area on the listing, right? Because the square footage, like you're talking about, people don't know if it's planned properly. And we ended up selling it for, luckily, 1.2. And because the people came in, there was 3 people who went, like, there's a whole bunch of people who bid 850, right? They didn't get it. 3 people got it, and they could feel the difference in the comfort, in the just how it felt to be in the space, how it was designed, and they could see that we put all the utility bills, etc. And so I think people get it, but how do you do, like I just did a passive house addition to my cottage. I'm like, I just want people to come stay there. We should, well, where's Tim? Airbnb them.
Just renting to people who need it.
I'm just gonna let people come. See, because you don't know till you feel, how do you, like, it's so hard for people to get it till they're in there. Anyways.
More on incentives, where I live in Montreal, half of households rent, and the people who pay the utility bills are not people who would invest the capital expenses of these upgrades, nor are they the people who would, the landlords are not the ones to experience any hypothetical comfort benefits. So how do you motivate retrofit in that context?
Well, in Quebec, I think you're not allowed to maintain oil and then soon a gas heating appliance. So I think the government did it there. The province, am I right? That's my understanding in Quebec, that you're not allowed to maintain any oil. So, but I get, that's Quebec, right? In Ontario, if we took the same scenario, then I think the new again, I haven't read it yet. The new rebate program takes into account renters. So we'll have to see what they say, but that is an interesting situation for sure.
I just wanted to ask you about that green button data. Could you maybe explain who's driving that? Where's that coming from?
I think that was a federal thing that they had to, all the utilities are required to make their data available to third parties. And right now, we understand we're the only one that's asked. We're working first with Hydro One, and we're the only ones that have asked for it for this reason. There's other people who just want the data for some, I don't know, for some other reason, but.
That's where I was kind of getting at, because the thing that's really frustrating about a lot of trying to incentivize homeowners is that you have to explain the value, and that's challenging, right? Because you can show them like the wonderful beam report, and they'll go, "Cool, what does that mean?"
Yeah.
To us. So we have to do a lot of work. But like I think things as simple as like the walk score on MLS. Like why in God's name we have that? I don't know.
And so they're working on that. They've just done a pilot in Alberta, of all places, Edmonton and Calgary, where the realtors, they had, again, this fancy map, and they did this not actual but real, like fake modeling. And of course, then there's all these questions like, they're like, but this is going to put houses that aren't efficient at a disadvantage. Exactly. That's the point. So, but I think, and the federal government said that home labeling on sale is coming. It's been around for years. And Jill, my co-founder, she's from Scotland. She's like, it's weird the things that people care about. The home energy labeling program there, it's been around for a long time. It came, nobody cared, nobody said boo, it's just been, but then they asked about like standardized testing for kids. People went crazy. And here, I guess the opposite. So anyhow, it's, I think it's gonna come. I hope it's gonna come because like my house, luckily I found some people that knew, but you can't walk into a house and know how efficient that house is. Right? So I think it's really important for homeowners. They should be demanding it. Anyways, Tim, you kick me out?
Well, maybe, is there like a wrap up one?
No, but if anyone wants to talk, is there? No, it was just a question. So if anyone wants to talk to me about if this could, I'd be really, like, we're really looking for feedback to see, like you said, there's things that I think are really cool, like the beam calculation, embodied carbon, but do you think homeowners are going to be like, who cares? Or I don't get it? Or like, what information are your clients really looking for that would be most beneficial to include in these reports? And do you think it would be beneficial for your businesses? And just come talk to me. I'm happy, as you can see, to talk.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Oh. We're going to squeeze one more in.
Sure.
Talk briefly about the equity part that you were mentioning before. I'm just curious about what that means to you.
So right now, like our clients who are spending, $600,000 or whatever to renovate their homes, and maybe they can afford to get the energy model done, that is something that is not attainable for most people. So if we're able to get the information about how basically that energy model done on a much less expensive basis, then more people can use the information. That's really what we're thinking of. And eventually what we see is, yeah, there's a lot of people spending money, and if we get them to drive this whole process, then eventually it's going to get cheaper and faster and easier. And
Okay, all right.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Is Cedar around?